He was the most dangerous man in the city, the target of a professional hit that no one saw coming. No one, except for a waitress who was invisible to the world. In the high-stakes world of organized crime, a split second is the difference between life and death, and tonight, that split second came down to a single glance. One look from nobody saved the Mafia King's life, and in doing so, she ignited a war that would burn the underworld to the ground. Elise Turner stood in the shadows of the obsidian bistro, a heavy tray of polished silverware trembling slightly in her hands. She wasn't trembling from the weight of the silver, but from the weight of the realization crashing down on her. The bistro was a theater of the wealthy, a place where senators dined with cartel leaders, and where the staff were expected to be deaf, dumb, and blind. But Elise had never been good at being blind. From her vantage point near the kitchen swinging doors, she had a clear view of the entire floor. She saw the politicians pretending to be honest, the mistresses pretending to be wives, and the enemies pretending to be friends. But tonight, she saw something else. She saw death walking through the door. Two men had entered moments ago. They didn't wait for the hostess. They didn't check their coats. They moved with a predatory efficiency that made the fine hairs on the back of Elise's neck stand up. One was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that was cut just a little too loose around the chest. The other was stockier, with a buzz cut and eyes that scanned the room like a security camera. They bypassed the bar and took a table that offered a direct line of sight to the VIP section, the section reserved for only one man. Young Won-kyu. The Mafia King. The Shark of the East. Young sat alone at his table, bathed in the soft glow of a crystal chandelier. He looked exhausted, his broad shoulders slumped slightly under the weight of a tailored Italian suit. He was scrolling through his phone, completely absorbed, utterly unaware that two wolves had just entered the sheepfold. Elise felt a cold knot of dread tighten in her stomach. She needed this job. Her grandmother's medical bills were piling up on the kitchen counter like snowdrifts, threats of eviction lurking in the red ink of every late notice. If she caused a scene, she would be fired. If she was wrong, she would be fired. But as she watched the taller man adjust his jacket, she saw the undeniable dull glint of a suppressor against his ribs. It wasn't a wallet. It wasn't a phone. It was a silencer. Elise checked the room. Young's bodyguards were outside, likely changing shifts or distracted by a decoy. He was exposed. Vulnerable. The stocky man checked his watch, a synchronized, deliberate motion, and then looked at his partner. A subtle nod passed between them. It was the signal. They were going to kill him right here, amidst the fine china and expensive wine. Elise had two choices. Stay silent, keep her head down, and survive, or step into the crossfire and risk everything for a man who represented everything dangerous in this city. She thought of her grandmother, sleeping in their drafty apartment, dependent on Elise for every breath. She thought of the fear that ruled her life. And then, she moved. She grabbed a silver pitcher of ice water, the condensation cold against her sweating palms. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird, beating a frantic rhythm that echoed in her ears. Don't do this, a voice in her head screamed. Run. But her feet carried her forward, across the plush carpet, straight toward the eye of the storm. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't a hero. She was just a waitress. But she was the only line of defense Young Won-kyu had left. The walk to table 4 felt like miles. Time seemed to warp, stretching out into an agonizing slow motion. Elise could hear the clinking of silverware, the murmur of hushed conversations, the soft jazz playing in the background, all of it oblivious to the violence about to erupt. She felt the eyes of the assassins on her as she crossed their path, but she didn't look at them. She kept her eyes fixed on Young. He was still looking at his phone, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't even acknowledge her presence as she stepped up to the table. To him, she was just part of the furniture, a mechanism for delivering water and clearing plates. More water, sir. Elise asked. Her voice was steady, a professional mask hiding the terror clawing at her throat. Jung didn't look up. He waved a dismissive hand. No. Elise didn't leave. Instead, she stepped closer, invading his personal space in a way that no server ever should. She tilted the pitcher and began to pour water into his half-full glass. The liquid rose, inching up the crystal sides. She kept pouring. The water reached the rim. She kept pouring. It spilled over, cascading down the sides of the glass, soaking the pristine white tablecloth, and splashing onto the expensive silk cuff of Jung's shirt. The shock of the cold water snapped Jung out of his trance. He jerked his hand back, his head snapping up, eyes blazing with sudden, lethal fury. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. He looked ready to strike her, ready to have her thrown out into the street. But Elise didn't apologize. She didn't grab a napkin. She froze, leaning in close to him, her face inches from his. She locked eyes with him, a gaze so intense, so filled with raw, unadulterated terror, that it stopped Jung cold. She widened her eyes, communicating a primal warning that transcended language. Then, with deliberate, exaggerated slowness, she flicked her eyes to the dark reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window behind him, then back to his eyes. Then to the reflection again. Jung was a predator. And game recognizes game. He didn't turn around. He didn't question her sanity. In a fraction of a second, his brain processed the anomaly, the spilled water, the lack of apology, the terror in the girl's eyes, the specific direction of her gaze. He looked at the reflection in the dark glass. In the distorted mirror of the night, he saw the room behind him. He saw the two men standing up. He saw the tall one raising his arm. He saw the black metal of the gun leveling at the back of his head. Elise saw the realization hit him. It wasn't fear she saw in his eyes, it was calculation. "Get down!" Jung roared. The command was guttural, exploding from his chest. In one fluid, violent motion, Jung kicked upward with both legs. The heavy oak table, laden with crystal and porcelain, flipped into the air, turning into a makeshift barricade. At the exact same moment, the air was split by the sickening thwip-thwip-thwip of suppressed gunfire. The bullets, meant for Jung's skull, slammed into the thick wood of the table, sending splinters flying like shrapnel. The bistro erupted into absolute chaos. The sound of shattering glass was deafening as the window behind them exploded inward. Patrons screamed, diving under tables and scrambling for the exits. Jung didn't just save himself, his hand shot out, grabbing Elise by the wrist with a grip like iron. He yanked her down behind the cover of the overturned table just as a second volley of bullets chewed up the upholstery where she had been standing a second ago. "Stay down!" Jung shouted over the noise, pulling a compact handgun from an ankle holster. His movements were precise, practiced. He wasn't panicking, he was working. He popped up over the rim of the table, firing two rapid, deafening shots toward the assassins to suppress their advance. The smell of gunpowder and expensive perfume mixed in the air, creating a nauseating cocktail of violence and luxury. Elise was curled into a ball on the floor, her hands covering her head, her body shaking uncontrollably. She had never heard a gun fired in real life before. It was louder than in the movies, a physical force that punched the air out of the room. Glass shards were everywhere, glittering in the carpet like diamonds. "We can't stay here," Jung growled, glancing at the kitchen doors. "They'll flank us." He looked at Elise. She was frozen. He grabbed her shoulder, his fingers digging in. "Look at me," he commanded. Elise looked up, her eyes wide and tear-filled. "You started this. You saved me. Now you have to finish it. Can you run?" Elise nodded, unable to speak. The adrenaline was flooding her system, turning her fear into a strange, vibrating energy. "On my signal," Jung said. He fired 3 more shots blindly over the table, forcing the attackers to duck behind a marble pillar. Go. Now. They broke cover. Young moved with a terrifying speed, keeping his body between Elise and the shooters. They sprinted toward the kitchen, boots and heels crunching over broken glass. Bullets whizzed past them, buzzing like angry hornets. One struck a stack of plates on a server station, exploding them into white dust. They burst through the swinging doors into the kitchen. The kitchen staff was in pandemonium. Chefs were cowering under stainless steel prep tables, a pot of sauce was burning on the stove. Young didn't slow down. He dragged Elise through the labyrinth of ovens and prep stations. Out the back. Move, he shouted at a line cook who was frozen in their path. Young shoved a rolling rack of heavy pots behind them, blocking the aisle just as the kitchen doors swung open again behind them. They burst out into the cool night air of the alleyway. The sudden silence of the outside world was jarring. Young's armored black sedan was idling at the curb, the driver looking around in confusion at the sounds of chaos spilling from the restaurant. Open the door. Young screamed, sprinting the last 10 yards. The driver reacted instantly, throwing the back door open. Young shoved Elise inside, practically throwing her onto the leather seat, and dove in after her. Drive. Go. Go. Young roared, slamming the door shut. The assassins burst out of the alley door, weapons raised. They opened fire, but it was too late. The heavy sedan peeled away, tires screeching and smoking against the asphalt. Bullets sparked harmlessly against the bulletproof glass of the rear window as the car accelerated, weaving into traffic and disappearing into the city night. Inside the car, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. Elise sat pressed against the door, her chest heaving, gasping for air as if she were drowning. Her mind couldn't catch up with her body. 1 minute she was pouring water, the next she was in a getaway car with a warlord. She looked down at her hands. They were covered in soot and someone else's blood, though she wasn't injured. Young sat on the other side of the seat. He was calm now, terrifyingly so. He holstered his weapon and straightened his tie, brushing glass fragments from his lapel. He took a deep breath, exhaling slowly through his nose, regaining his composure. Then, he turned his attention to his security team in the front. The driver, a massive man with a thick neck named Kale, looked in the rearview mirror, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Elise. "Boss, who is she?" "We have a civilian in the car. Protocol is clear." The bodyguard in the passenger seat turned around, a grim expression on his face. "She's seen your face, boss. She's seen the hit. She knows the vehicle. We can't have loose ends. We need to drop her at the bridge." Elise stopped breathing. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Drop her at the bridge was a euphemism she understood all too well. It meant a bullet to the back of the head and a body in the river. She looked at Young, panic rising in her throat again. She had just saved his life, and his men were discussing her execution like it was a weather report. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I won't say anything. I just wanted to help." Young looked at his men, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at Elise. He studied her face, taking in the fear, the innocence, and the raw courage that lay beneath it. He looked at the water stain on his cuff, the physical evidence of her intervention. "Kale," Young said, his voice soft but carrying an edge of razor-sharp steel. "Yes, boss." "If you or anyone else touches a hair on her head," Young said, maintaining eye contact with Elise, "I will cut your hands off and feed them to you." The car went deadly silent. Kale swallowed hard and nodded, turning his eyes back to the road. "Understood, boss." Young leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, bringing his face closer to Elise's. "You saved my life," he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. In my world, loyalty is the only currency that matters. You paid a debt you didn't owe. I don't kill people who save me, Elise. You're safe. Elise let out a sob she had been holding back. Where are we going? To my safe house, Jung replied. Those men knew my security blind spots. They knew where I would be sitting. This wasn't a random hit. It was an inside job. Someone close to me wants me dead. And until I find out who, you aren't safe anywhere in this city. You're a witness, and they will come for you. The safe house was a fortress disguised as an abandoned warehouse in the industrial shipping district. The car rolled through a series of checkpoints, steel shutters rising and falling behind them until they were deep inside a concrete bunker. The interior was stark but expensive, banks of computer monitors, walls of weaponry, and living quarters that rivaled a penthouse suite. Jung stepped out of the car and immediately began barking orders into a satellite phone, mobilizing his lieutenants, locking down his territory. Elise stood by the car, hugging her arms around herself, shivering in the air-conditioned chill. She felt small and out of place in her bistro uniform, stained with water and grime. Jung hung up the phone and walked over to a small bar in the corner. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He walked back to Elise and held one out. Drink. It's whiskey. It will settle your nerves. Elise took the glass with shaking hands and took a large gulp. The alcohol burned her throat, but the warmth spread through her chest, grounding her. Jung pulled a metal chair over and sat down, gesturing for her to sit on the leather sofa opposite him. Now, Jung said, his eyes locking onto hers with laser focus. We need to talk. My security team swept that bistro 10 minutes before I arrived. They saw nothing. My personal guard was stationed at the front. They saw nothing. You, a waitress carrying a tray. Saw 2 professional hitmen that my best soldiers missed. How? Elise took a deep breath. I just notice things. I have to. Don't give me that, Jung said sharply. Ordinary people don't spot assassins. Did someone tip you off? Are you working for a rival family? No. Elise cried, the accusation stinging. I work for tips. I have a sick grandmother. If I get an order wrong, I don't get paid. If I don't get paid, she doesn't get her medicine. I've spent my whole life watching people, reading their moods, noticing the little things so I can stay one step ahead of trouble. That's all. Jung studied her. He saw the desperation in her eyes, the honesty. He leaned back. Tell me exactly what you saw. Every detail. If you want to help me find who did this, I need your eyes. Elise closed her eyes, letting the scene at the bistro replay in her mind. It was a skill she had always had. A photographic memory for details that others filtered out as noise. The tall one, she began, her voice gaining strength as she focused on the memory. He was wearing a charcoal suit. Expensive, but ill-fitting around the shoulders, like he was wearing a vest underneath. He checked his watch 3 times in 4 minutes, a silver Breitling with a cracked face. He didn't look at the menu once. He stared at your reflection in the window. She paused, visualizing the second man. The short one. He had a limp in his left leg when he walked in. But when he stood up to shoot, he put all his weight on that leg. The limp was fake. It was a distraction, or maybe hiding a weapon in his pant leg. Jung was listening intently, his respect for her growing with every sentence. Anything else? Think, Elise. Anything that can identify them. Yes, Elise said, her eyes snapping open. When the tall one raised his arm to aim, his jacket sleeve pulled back. Just for a second. I saw a tattoo on the inside of his wrist. Jung leaned forward, sliding a notepad and a pen across the coffee table. Draw it. Elise picked up the pen. Her hand was steady now. She drew a sharp, angular shape, a triangle intersected by a jagged lightning bolt, with 3 small dots positioned at the apex. It was a specific, geometric design. She pushed the paper back to Jung. Jung looked at the drawing, and the color drained from his face. He stared at the symbol for a long time, the silence in the room growing heavy and suffocating. His jaw tightened, a muscle feathering in his cheek. "You know it," Elise whispered. It wasn't a question. "I know it," Jung said, his voice cold as the grave. "It's not a gang sign. It's a unit patch. A private mercenary squad called the Vipers. They handle specialized logistics. High-value transport. Wet work." He stood up and walked to the wall of monitors, his back to her. "That unit is strictly off the books. They don't take contracts from outsiders. They only take orders from inside my organization. Only 3 people have the contact codes for the Vipers." He turned back to face her, his expression grim. "My chief of staff. My head of security. And my brother-in-law, Marcus." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Jung's own family, his inner circle, had ordered the hit. "The men at the Bistro knew your schedule," Elise said softly, connecting the dots. "They knew exactly when your guards would be swapping shifts. They knew where you liked to sit. That's why they were so confident." "Exactly," Jung said. "And because you saw the shooter's face, and you saw the tattoo, you are the only person who can link the hit back to the traitor. If the shooter had killed me, the traitor would have taken over the empire tonight. But I'm alive. And now, they're going to be panicked." Jung walked over to her. "Elise, you can't go home. If they know I survived, they will scour the city for witnesses. They'll find the Bistro staff. They'll find you. They will kill you to cut the loose end." Elise stood up, panic flaring again. "I have to go home. You don't understand. My grandmother, she's bedridden. She needs her insulin injections at 8 a.m. sharp. If I'm not there, she goes into shock. I can't leave her alone." Jung saw the terror in her eyes, not for herself, but for the only family she had. It was a trait he admired above all else. "Give me the address," Jung ordered, pulling out his phone. "Apartment 4B, 220, East Avenue. Please, just let me go to her." Jung shook his head as he dialed. "No. I'm bringing her to you." He spoke rapidly into the phone. "Unit 4, immediate extract. 220, East Avenue, Apartment 4B. Elderly female, medical condition. Bring a trauma team and a transport unit. Treat her like she is my own mother. Bring her to the estate. Go." He hung up and looked at Elise. "She is being moved to my private estate in the hills. She will have round-the-clock nurses, the best doctors money can buy, and armed guards at her door. She will be safer there than she has ever been in her life." Elise slumped back onto the sofa, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you saved me," Jung said simply. "And because I need you. I can't strike back blindly. If I execute the wrong lieutenant, I start a civil war. I need to be 100% sure which one of them hired the Vipers. And you are going to help me find him." The next day was a blur of transformation. Elise was moved from the warehouse to a secure penthouse suite downtown. She wasn't treated as a prisoner, but she wasn't free. She was a piece on a chessboard now. A team of stylists arrived, not to make her look beautiful for vanity's sake, but to create a disguise. They took the tired waitress and turned her into a high-society enigma. They dressed her in a floor-length emerald gown made of silk that flowed like water. They pinned her hair up in an intricate style that exposed the elegant curve of her neck. They adorned her with diamond earrings that caught the light with every turn of her head. But the real preparation came from Jung. He sat with her for hours in the living room, showing her dossiers of his lieutenants. "Study them," Jung said, his voice intense. "This is Marcus. My brother-in-law. Charming, loud, likes to gamble. This is Vinny, the treasurer. Nervous, sweats when he lies. This is Silas, head of security. Cold, efficient. What am I looking for?" Elise asked, staring at the faces of men who killed for a living. "You're looking for the tattoo," Jung said. "The Vipers are loyal to the coin, but they also brand their owners. It's a ritual. The man who holds the contract often carries a mark of the pact. Or, he will have a tell. A slip-up. You have the eyes, Elise. You see what others miss. Tonight, at the organization gala, you will be my date. You will be silent. You will be observant. And you will find the man who tried to kill me. What if I can't?" Elise whispered, looking at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked powerful, mysterious. But inside, she was still the terrified girl from the bistro. "You will," Jung said, standing behind her, his dark eyes meeting hers in the glass. "Because you're fighting for your grandmother. And I'm fighting for my kingdom. We don't lose." The annual organization gala was the event of the season for the underworld. Held in the grand ballroom of the city's most historic hotel, it was a gathering of sharks in tuxedos. The air smelled of expensive lilies, roasted duck, and treachery. When Jung Won-kyu walked in with Elise on his arm, the room went silent. The rumors of his death had been greatly exaggerated, but the attempt on his life was known. Seeing him walk in, looking stronger than ever, with a stunning, unknown woman on his arm, sent a ripple of shock through the crowd. Elise felt the weight of 100 stares. She gripped Jung's arm tighter. "Relax," he murmured, his lips barely moving. "Smile. Let them wonder who you are. The more they look at you, the less they look at my guards positioning themselves by the doors." They moved through the room. Jung played his part perfectly. He laughed, shook hands, slapped backs. He looked like a man without a care in the world. But Elise felt the tension radiating off him like heat. He was scanning the room for threats, while she scanned for clues. She watched the hands. She watched the wrists. She watched the eyes. Vinny the treasurer came over, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "Jung. Boss. Thank God you're okay." Elise watched his wrists as he gestured. "Nothing. Just a gold watch." Silas the security head nodded from the corner. His arms were crossed. His cuffs were buttoned tight. Elise couldn't see anything. Hours passed. The tension was giving Elise a headache. She felt like she was failing. "I don't see anything," she whispered to Jung as they pretended to admire an ice sculpture. "Keep looking," Jung said. "The traitor will get comfortable. He thinks he's safe. He thinks I don't know." Just then, a booming laugh echoed near the bar. "Jung. You old devil." It was Marcus. Jung's brother-in-law. He strode toward them, a drink in one hand, a cigar in the other. He was handsome, charismatic, the life of the party. He wore a white tuxedo jacket that made him stand out. "Marcus," Jung said, smiling. "I'm surprised you're not at the roulette table. Tonight is about family." Marcus declared, throwing an arm around Jung's shoulder, a gesture that made Jung's bodyguards tense up. "I was sick when I heard about the bistro. Sick. I've got boys tearing the city apart looking for the shooters." "I appreciate that, Marcus," Jung said smoothly. Marcus turned his attention to Elise. His eyes raked over her with a mixture of appreciation and suspicion. "And who is this vision? I don't think we've been introduced." "This is Elise," Jung said. "She's a new consultant." Marcus laughed. "Consultant? She's too pretty for business. He reached out to take Elise's hand, intending to kiss it in a mock gentlemanly gesture. As he reached out, his white jacket sleeve rode up. Underneath, he wore a black shirt. The cuff of the shirt was loose. As he bent his wrist to take her hand, the fabric pulled back. Elise froze. There, on the inside of Marcus's right wrist, partially hidden by the strap of his platinum watch, was a glimpse of blue ink. A jagged line. 3 dots. It was the tattoo. Marcus smiled at her, oblivious. He kissed her hand. Charmed. Elise pulled her hand back as if burned. She couldn't breathe. This was the man. The man laughing with Jung, hugging him, calling him brother. This was the man who had sent the killers to the bistro. Elise knew she couldn't say it out loud. Marcus was too close. If he suspected she knew, he might have a weapon. She turned to Jung. She raised her hand to her neck and touched the diamond pendant of her necklace, the specific signal they had agreed upon in the penthouse. I found him. Jung saw the gesture. He didn't react immediately. He didn't gasp. He didn't flinch. He simply looked at Elise, verifying the signal. Her eyes were locked on his, pleading and certain. She gave a microscopic nod, then glanced briefly at Marcus's wrist. Jung turned his head slowly to look at Marcus. The warmth vanished from his face instantly, replaced by a cold, abyssal darkness. It was the look of a man who had just severed the last tie to his humanity. Marcus, sensing the sudden shift in atmospheric pressure, stopped smiling. Jung. What's the matter? You look like you've seen a ghost. I have, Jung said softly. I'm looking at one right now. Jung reached into his pocket and pulled out a remote for the microphone system. He tapped it. The feedback screeched, silencing the band. The room turned to look at him. A toast. Jung announced, his voice booming through the speakers, though he never took his eyes off Marcus. He grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing tray. To loyalty, Jung said. The rarest commodity in the world. He took a sip. And to the rats, Jung continued, his voice dropping an octave, who try to eat the lion while he sleeps. Grab him, Jung said, his voice calm and conversational. Before Marcus could process the command, 4 of Jung's elite security guards materialized from the crowd. They seized Marcus by the arms, pinning him in place. Jung. What is this? Marcus screamed, struggling. Get your hands off me. I'm his brother. The crowd gasped, forming a wide, terrified circle around the 2 men. Jung stepped forward. He didn't yell. He walked up to Marcus with the inevitability of a glacier. He reached out, grabbed the lapel of Marcus's white jacket, and ripped it open. Then he grabbed the sleeve of the black shirt underneath and yanked it upward, tearing the buttons. The blue tattoo was exposed. The triangle. The lightning bolt. The mark of the vipers. You hired them, Jung said, his voice echoing in the silent ballroom. You sent them to the bistro. You tried to take my crown. Marcus stopped struggling. He looked at the tattoo, then at Jung. The mask of the loving brother fell away, revealing a twisted sneer of resentment. You're getting soft, Jung. You're weak. You let outsiders run our business. It was time for a change. I did what had to be done. Soft? Jung asked. He shook his head. I'm not soft. I just have better eyes than you. He gestured to Elise, who stood like a statue in her emerald gown. A waitress saw what you tried to hide. A nobody saw your failure. Jung turned to his guards. Take him to the basement. I will deal with him personally before the sun comes up. You can't do this. Marcus screamed as he was dragged away, his heels skidding on the polished floor. We're family. Jung. The doors slammed shut, cutting off his screams. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Jung straightened his jacket. He looked at the crowd of terrified elites. "Enjoy the dessert," he said. "It's to die for." Later that night, the chaos had subsided. The gala continued, albeit nervously, but Jung and Elise had retreated to the balcony of the penthouse suite. The city lights shimmered below them, a grid of gold and white. Jung leaned against the railing, holding a glass of wine. He looked tired, but for the first time, the tension was gone from his shoulders. "It's done," he said. Marcus confessed. He gave up everyone involved. The threat is gone. Elise stood beside him, the cold wind playing with the stray strands of her hair. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Do I go back to the bistro? Do I go back to being invisible?" Jung laughed, a low, genuine sound. He turned to face her. "You think I would let you carry trays after this? You saved my life, Elise. You rooted out a traitor that my entire security apparatus missed. You have a gift. You see the world in a way I need." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, black business card with gold embossing. He handed it to her. Elise took it. It read, "Elise Turner, Director of Strategic Operations." "I don't need another mistress," Jung said, his eyes warm. "And I don't need a wife. I need a partner. I need eyes I can trust. The pay is 10 times what you make in a year. Your grandmother is already settled in the guest house at the estate. She has a full medical team. You will never have to worry about a bill again." Elise looked at the card. She thought of the aching feet, the rude customers, the fear of the mailbox. She thought of the moment she poured the water, the moment she decided to stop being invisible. She looked up at Jung, the man she had saved, and who had saved her in return. She smiled, and for the first time in her life, she felt powerful. "When do I start?" she asked. Jung clinked his glass against hers. "You already have." Let me know your thoughts on the comment section. Thanks for watching. Do remember to hit the subscribe button, like and share this story, and I'll see you in the next one.